I remember the exact moment I said it. Not because I had been rehearsing it for weeks, turning the words over in my head until all the rough edges were smooth enough to deliver cleanly. Not because I had a plan, or a moment selected, or any idea that a summer backyard on a Saturday evening would be the place where 4 years of swallowing the truth would finally come undone. I said it because it was the truest thing I knew, and after all that time, it simply would not go back down. We were standing near the fence at Rachel's backyard party. The kind of July evening that smells like charcoal smoke and freshly cut grass, and the very specific sweetness of a summer that knows it's starting to fade. Paper cups, conversation, the easy noise of people who have known each other long enough to let the silence breathe. Someone, Marcus, Rachel's husband, a good man with no instinct for restraint, looked at the two of us standing close together, shoulders almost touching, and said it. "You two? I keep forgetting you're not actually a couple." Claire laughed first. It was her easy laugh, the gracious one she kept for moments that weren't entirely funny but didn't deserve awkwardness. She touched my arm the way she always did, light, automatic, like breathing, and said the words I had heard her say a dozen times to a dozen different people in the 4 years I had known her. "We're just friends. We've always been just friends." I looked at her when she said it. She wasn't looking at me. She was smiling at Marcus, hair tucked behind one ear, paper cup of lemonade balanced in her hand, looking completely, totally fine, like the sentence had cost her nothing, like it was simply the accurate name for a thing and she had only just remembered it. I said it before I could stop myself. "Then why do I miss you the second you walk away?" The words came out quiet. Quiet enough that Marcus didn't hear, but Claire did. I watched her smile go still, not disappear, just pause, just hold, for exactly half a second. She turned her head and looked at me with those eyes that always seemed to land one layer deeper than whatever I was choosing to show. Neither of us spoke. Then Rachel called everyone inside for dessert, and the moment dissolved like smoke in an open window, and Claire looked away, and I looked away, and we went inside with everyone else, and I stood at the dessert table for a long time staring at a bowl of strawberries and not taking any. But to understand why those 6 words changed everything, I need to take you back to the beginning. Not some grand, movie poster beginning, just a Tuesday night 4 years ago at a birthday party I almost skipped, where a woman I had never met in my life walked up to me near the appetizer table with the confidence of someone who had never been embarrassed by anything, and I quietly told her she had spinach in her teeth. Most people in that situation go red, excuse themselves, vanish into the bathroom for the rest of the night. I was braced for exactly that. Instead, Claire Donovan looked at me for one full second with an expression of pure, philosophical acceptance, like she had submitted this information to a committee inside her head, and the committee had voted unanimously to find it hilarious. And then she burst out laughing. The real kind. The kind that makes your eyes water and your shoulders shake and the strangers nearby start smiling without knowing why. "Of course," she said, when she could breathe again. Of course it was spinach. She grabbed a napkin, handled it without drama or ceremony, and stuck out her right hand. "Claire Donovan. And before you say anything else humiliating about my face, I want you to know I also have genuinely impressive qualities." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm and her fingers were cold from holding her drink, and she was looking at me like she was already editing this into a story she would tell at future parties. "Jake Mercer," I said. "What kind of impressive qualities?" "I'm exceptional at parallel parking. I remember birthdays without being prompted. And I can name every state capital in under 60 seconds. The last one is going to come up constantly in day-to-day life." She pointed at me. "Exactly. See, you get it. Most people don't get it. I get it." That was 4 years ago, and I still think about those 3 words sometimes. They were the first real ones she ever said to me, not counting spinach. And from that night forward, something between us simply fit, the way certain friendships do, as if the shape of them existed long before you found the person, and meeting them is just finally showing up to something that was always there waiting. We did not date. I want to be honest about that, because people always assumed and we always corrected them, and for a long time the correction felt completely accurate to me. We were friends. We were friends in the way that word rarely gets enough credit for. She texted me at 11 at night about a documentary she was watching, half outraged and half fascinated, and I texted back until midnight with equal investment. She called me when her car broke down on the highway at 7 in the morning, and I was already in my truck before she finished explaining where she was. I called her the night I got passed over for a promotion I had worked 18 months toward. Not because I wanted advice, just because I needed someone to sit inside the disappointment with me before I could name what to do about it. She sat with it. She did not rush me toward a lesson or a silver lining. She just stayed on the phone and let the feeling be the feeling. We had Thursday dinners. A diner on the corner of 5th and Maple, a booth in the back left corner that we had claimed without discussion, decaf coffee because neither of us wanted the voltage after 8 o'clock, the waitress, a woman named Dot who had been working that shift for 20-something years and had the energy of someone who had seen every kind of human situation and was no longer impressed by most of them, stopped bringing menus after our third visit. She would just bring the coffee and look at us with that particular expression, the one that said she had filed us under a category and was waiting patiently for us to catch up. I work as a landscape designer for a small firm downtown. I spend my days thinking about how space feels, how the placement of a single tree can alter the quality of light in an entire yard, how a well-built garden can make a person exhale without knowing why, how patience and intention and the right conditions can turn a bare stretch of ground into something that makes people stop and look. I like the slowness of it. I like that growing things do not lie. Claire worked as a physical therapist. She specialized in recovery, people learning to move again after surgeries, accidents, the kinds of injuries that make the simplest actions suddenly require enormous effort. She had a quality with her patients that I got to witness once or twice and that I found almost impossible to describe accurately. A patience that was not passive, a certainty about what a person was capable of that she held on their behalf when they could not hold it themselves. She would push when someone needed pushing and rest when someone needed rest, and she had an instinct for knowing which was which that went beyond training. Her patients tended to walk out of that clinic standing differently than they had walked in. For 4 years, this was our life. Easy and full and comfortable in a way I did not examine closely, the way you do not examine the things that work, you just live inside them and trust the foundation. I should have understood something was shifting when I noticed the texts. Not that I was receiving them. I had always received them, morning messages about whatever she had seen on her walk to the clinic, late-night updates on whatever book had upset her this week. I noticed that I was saving them, reading one and not deleting it, scrolling back through weeks of conversation the way you return to a song that keeps meaning something new. I told myself it was nothing unusual, that some conversations deserved to be kept, that this was simply documentation of something good. Then she told me about Derek, Thursday in late October. The diner windows fogged from the warmth inside while rain came down steady against the glass. She had both hands wrapped around her coffee mug and she said she'd been asked out by a colleague at the hospital. His name was Derek Walsh. He worked in orthopedics. He had, by her account, a very good face, consistent manners, and a habit of bringing coffee for the entire department every Monday morning without being asked. So, I said. She watched me carefully across the rim of her mug. So I think I'm going to say yes. I looked at my coffee. You should. Monday coffee is a green flag. That's established science. She laughed. But she kept watching me in that particular way of hers, the layered look, the one that checked something below the surface of whatever was visible. And I kept looking at my coffee, and Dot came by and refilled our cups, and the conversation moved forward to other things. I drove her home through the rain. I walked back to my truck, climbed in, sat there without starting the engine for a while. I told myself the feeling was nothing, that I was just cold, that the slight hollow quality in my chest was simply the tail end of a long week and had nothing to do with the name Derek Walsh. I believed that for approximately 2.5 days. I met Derek for the first time at a dinner party Claire hosted at her apartment 6 weeks into the relationship. He arrived with an expensive bottle of wine and the specific ease of a man who has never not been comfortable in a room. Tall, well-dressed, a handshake that communicated exactly the right amount of confidence. He said, "Claire's told me so much about you," in a tone that sounded warm but did not particularly invite follow-up, and then moved toward the other guests with the smooth momentum of someone who understood that a room was a thing to be worked. I spent 20 minutes watching him. He was good at it. He remembered details from conversations 5 minutes after they happened. He laughed at the right moments and asked the right questions and touched Claire's back lightly when he passed behind her. Small, automatic. The gesture of a man staking a claim he considered uncontested. None of this was wrong. None of it was bad, exactly. But there was something in the way he spoke about her to other people. Not cruel. Not careless in any obvious sense. Just slightly categorical. He would say, "Claire's the practical one," or "Claire handles the day-to-day stuff," in a tone that filed her under a heading without asking if the heading fit. Like she was a feature of his life he was happy to have but had already finished thinking about. She did not appear to notice, or if she did, she absorbed it without comment. After dinner, we ended up side by side on the balcony. She was holding a glass of red wine and looking at the city lights, and she said, "What do you think?" "He seems great," I said, because that was the thing I was supposed to say. She nodded slowly, looking at the city. "He's really consistent. That matters to me." "It should." She looked at me then, a brief look. A moment of something I could not identify before she smiled and went back inside to her guests. I stayed on the balcony a little longer, leaning against the railing, looking at the city lights going about their uncomplicated business far below, and I thought, this is fine. This is exactly how things are supposed to be. I drove home and did not save any texts that night. The Thursday dinners began to develop exceptions. Not because Claire was avoiding me. She texted the way she always had, called on lunch breaks, sent the same photographs of interesting plants because she knew I would appreciate the root system. But Derek had plans, and her schedule shifted, and the Thursday ritual that had been as dependable as the season started to have holes in it. The first time she canceled, she texted 2 hours in advance. Apologies, a rain check, a row of small hearts. The second time, 40 minutes. The third time, I was already at the diner, already in the booth, already nodding at Dot who had already set the coffee down. I waited. The booth across from me stayed empty. I read the menu I did not need. I watched the window. At the 45-minute mark I typed, "Hey, were we still on tonight?" Her reply came 9 minutes later. "Oh my God, Jake, I am so sorry. Derek surprised me with dinner reservations and it completely slipped my mind. Can we do next week, please? I'm the worst." I read it twice. Then I typed, "No worries at all. Next week, have fun tonight." I set my phone down on the table and looked at the empty seat across from me and did not let myself think about it too directly. Dot came over. She looked at the empty seat with an expression that was kind and entirely too perceptive. "Just me," I said. She brought me pie without asking. I ate it and watched the rain run down the window and told myself I was fine with a conviction that got less convincing with each bite. The months that followed had a specific quality to them that I got very good at managing. Work was busy. A large residential project on the east side of the city. A corporate plaza that needed to be reimagined from the ground up. The kind of work that is absorbing enough to occupy most of your attention if you let it. I let it. I filled the hours with drafts and site visits and meetings, and the low steady ache of something being quietly wrong became easier to overlook the more crowded the days were. But here is the thing about Claire. She did not disappear. She was still there. She still texted, still called, still sent photographs of things she knew I would find interesting. We still had dinners, just not every Thursday, and when we had them, they were the same as they had always been. Easy and warm and real in a way that nothing else in my week quite matched. And every time, every single time, without exception, the same thing happened. She would leave. She would walk away down the hallway, or her car would pull out of the parking lot, or the call would end and the line would go quiet, and the room, or the street, or the silence would go several degrees emptier than it had been before she arrived. Not just empty. Specifically, particularly, her shaped empty. The absence with a name. I knew what it meant. I had known for a while. I simply had not done anything with the knowing, because some truths are easier to carry quietly than to set down and look at directly. Rachel's backyard party happened in July, on an evening that smelled like charcoal and grass and summer going soft at the edges, and I said the truest 6 words I had ever said to Claire Donovan, quietly enough that only she heard them. And then we went inside and I stared at strawberries and did not take any and said nothing more about it. She texted when she got home that night. Tonight was fun. Sleep well. I read it 4 times. I waited 18 minutes before I wrote back, yeah it was. You too. I lay in the dark with my phone on my chest and thought about the half-second pause in her smile. The way it had gone still, just briefly, just long enough to mean something. I thought about what that half-second might contain, and then I told myself to stop because the risk of being wrong about something this specific was more than I was ready to carry. She called at 2:14 in the morning, 3 weeks later. I was already awake. One of those nights when the mind simply refuses to settle, circling the same loops without arriving anywhere. When her name lit up the screen, I answered before the second ring had finished. Hey, I said. You okay? The pause before she spoke answered the question more completely than whatever words were coming. The practiced kind of pause. The pause of someone who has been holding something together for several hours and is beginning to feel the full weight of the effort. Not entirely, she said. Her voice was steady the way someone's voice is steady when they have been working at it. Where are you? A small sound. Something adjacent to a laugh. My kitchen floor. Don't make it weird. I've sat on floors, I said. I don't have a position on floors. What happened? She told me slowly. She and Derek had attended a work event, his colleagues, a gathering with good wine and the careful conversational neutrality of people who do not know each other well enough to be honest. At some point in the evening, in a circle of people whose names she was still learning, Derek had said something about her. Not viciously, not with any obvious intent. Just a small offhand comment that positioned her as less than she was. Something about her being not really the career-driven type, delivered with an easy smile to people who did not know her, landing like a hand pressed gently but firmly on top of her head. Not a push. Just a quiet establishment of her ceiling. She had not said anything in the moment. She had smiled and continued the conversation and waited until they were in the car to tell him that it had bothered her. He had seemed genuinely surprised. She was being sensitive. It was just the way people talked at those things. It didn't mean anything. By the time they reached her building, the conversation had thinned into a polite silence, and he had gone home, and she had sat down on her kitchen floor with a bowl of cereal and called me. I was already reaching for my shoes. Stay there, I said. I'm coming. Jake, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. Stay there. I stopped at the all-night diner 2 blocks from her apartment. Not ours, a different one. And got 2 containers of soup and a sleeve of the crackers she always ate by the fistful, and then complained were too salty. When she opened the door, she was in sweatpants and an oversized shirt, hair loose, no performance left in her expression at all. She looked at the soup and the crackers and then at me with an expression I did not entirely know how to name. We sat on the kitchen floor. I do not know why we didn't move to the couch. Some conversations want the floor, the low center of gravity, the particular permission it gives you to take up space without pretense. We ate soup and she talked and I listened, and sometimes I said something and she listened back, and the city outside went about its quiet business, and the kitchen light hummed steadily overhead and the clock on the microwave read numbers I stopped paying attention to. At some point she set down her bowl and leaned her head back against the cabinet and looked at the ceiling with the expression of someone conducting a slow, private audit of something. Why do you always show up? She said. The question came out soft and genuine. Not an accusation, not even really directed at me. More like something she had been asking herself for a while, and had finally said out loud. Because you do the same, I said. She turned her head and looked at me. Would I? You have. Twice. She considered this. Something moved through her face. A quiet internal negotiation, the kind she did when she was deciding whether to say the real version of what she was thinking or the edited one. We're just friends, she said softly. Not to me exactly. More the way you remind yourself of a rule you have been relying on. That's why this works. Because there's no weight to it. No pressure. It's just easy. I set my soup container down on the tile. I looked at the floor for a moment. Just a moment, and then I said it again. The same way I had said it in Rachel's backyard. Quiet. Without architecture or preparation, because it was the only true thing I had left, and I was tired of keeping it in the place where true things go when you decide not to do anything with them. Claire, she looked at me. Then why do I miss you the second you walk away? The kitchen went completely silent. Not the silence of something breaking, not the silence of something going wrong. The silence of something becoming very still, the way air holds itself just before a significant shift in weather. The particular quiet of a room in which something important has just been said and both people present know it. She did not speak for a long time. She was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face in 4 years of looking at her face, and I had looked at it closely, in a lot of different kinds of light, in a lot of different circumstances. It was not surprise exactly. It was something more like recognition, the look of hearing a word in a language you thought you had forgotten, and discovering your mouth still knows the shape of it. "What?" she finally said. "You heard me." She looked away, then back. Her hands were in her lap, and she was working her thumb over her knuckle the way she did when she was thinking through something carefully and did not want to get it wrong. "Jake, you don't have to say anything," I said. "I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I've been calling it friendship for 4 years, and I meant it every single time. I want you to know that. But somewhere in the last year something changed, and I kept deciding not to look at it because I didn't want to make something strange out of the most important thing in my life." I paused, kept my voice even. But I sat in our booth alone for 45 minutes in October and told myself I was fine, and I was not fine, Claire. I was not fine at all. She went very still. "The booth," she said quietly. "Yeah, I felt awful about that." "I know you did. That's not why I'm telling you." I looked at her directly. "I'm telling you because you called me at 2 in the morning and I had my shoes on before you finished the sentence. And I need you to understand that that is not only because we are friends, it has not been only that for a long time." The silence came back. This time it was different. Softer, somehow. The kind of silence that is not empty but full of something that has not been shaped into words yet. She covered her face with both hands, just for a moment. Then she lowered them, and her eyes were bright, and she looked at me with the specific expression of someone who has been holding a door closed for a very long time and is starting to fully understand how much of their strength it has been quietly consuming. "I've been saying just friends like it was simply the correct name for what we are," she said slowly. "Every time someone assumed otherwise, I'd correct them, and I meant it in the moment, I swear I did. But afterward," she stopped, started again. "Afterward, there was always this feeling, like I had just put something back inside a box that did not quite close the way it used to. I did not move. I did not speak. I kept telling myself," she continued, "that if I allowed myself to want something more, I would ruin the one relationship in my life that actually worked the way relationships are supposed to work. That if I said it out loud, it would turn into something that could break, something with stakes and disappointments and all the ways things go wrong. And I did not want to risk what we had for something I wasn't certain about." She shook her head slowly. "So I went on dates, and I kept telling myself that what I had with you was in a separate category, that you weren't." She stopped. "That I wasn't what?" I said. She looked at me, straight and steady and entirely without the guard she usually kept somewhere near the surface. "That you weren't the one I compared everyone else to," she said, "without meaning to, without deciding to, just automatically every time, without exception." The kitchen light hummed. Outside, somewhere far below, a car moved slowly through the empty street, its headlights crossing the wall and disappearing. I reached across the floor between us and took her hand. She looked down at our hands. Her fingers were cold. They were always cold. I had noticed this the very first night I met her. And the detail had stayed with me the way small specific things about someone stay with you when you are paying a particular kind of attention, without admitting to yourself that you are doing it. Her fingers curled around mine without hesitation, without deliberation, automatically the way they had touched my arm at Rachel's backyard without her noticing she was doing it. "Derek," she said, "I know. I have to deal with that properly. I know. I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. I already told you that." She leaned her head against my shoulder. Her hair smelled like the same shampoo she had been using for the entire 4 years I had known her, and the familiarity of it hit me somewhere I was not prepared for. "You sat in that booth for 45 minutes, she said quietly. 47, technically, I counted. A small laugh, slightly uneven, the kind that lives right next to something heavier and borrows warmth from it. "I'm sorry," she said. "Stop. I mean it. I know you do. That's why I'm saying stop." We stayed like that for a long time. Her head on my shoulder, my hand around hers, the city going about its quiet life outside the window, the soup containers between us on the tile. I did not feel the need to say anything else. The silence had changed completely. It was the kind that comes after everything important has been said, and what remains is simply the ease of two people who know each other down to something close to the bone. After a while she said, "This is the part where I ask, now what?" "Now what?" I said. "Yeah, now what?" I thought about it. About 4 years of Thursday dinners and texts saved for no reason, and the specific quality of a room after she left it. About 47 minutes in a corner booth. About spinach and state capitals and the way certain true things are easier to carry quietly until they simply are not anymore. "Now we stop deciding we're only one thing," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "That's terrifying," she said. "Yeah," I said, "it is." "Okay," she said. "Just that. Just the one word, small and certain and entirely without decoration, the same way she had said "I get it" on a Tuesday night 4 years ago near an appetizer table, and I had understood immediately that this was a person who knew the weight a simple sentence could carry. She walked me to the door an hour later. The hallway outside her apartment was lit with that particular fluorescent quality that exists only late at night. Slightly too bright, slightly too yellow, the color of a place that was not designed to be seen this closely. She leaned against the doorframe with her arms folded lightly across her chest and looked at me with that expression, the one I had been cataloging without conscious intention for years, warm and searching and entirely, specifically hers. "Jake," she said. "Yeah, I miss you too." A pause, small and honest. "The second you walk away." I looked at her for a long moment, then I nodded. Slow and quiet, the way you acknowledge something that has been true for a long time and has simply just now been said out loud where both people can hear it. "Get some sleep," I said. She smiled. The real one. The one that reached the part of her eyes the gracious smile did not touch. "You too." I walked to the elevator and pressed the button and stood there with my hands in my jacket pockets, listening to her door close softly at the end of the hall. The elevator came. I stepped in. In the mirror on the back wall I looked like someone who had just set down something heavy he had been carrying for a very long time without fully registering the weight of it, and was now standing in the sudden lightness of its absence, still learning what it felt like to have both hands free. She called Derek the next day. She told me about it briefly that evening, without drama, without extensive post-mortem. He had taken it more graciously than she had expected. She thought he had known, somewhere beneath the surface, that something was not entirely present. Names make things easier to release. We did not immediately transform into something unrecognizable. That is not how it worked for us. We were too careful with each other, too aware of what we already had and what it would cost to be careless with it. Thursday came, and we were at the diner. The booth, the coffee, no menu required. And we talked the way we had always talked, and everything was the same except that it was different in the way things are different when they are finally allowed to be what they have been for a long time without permission. At the end of the evening she reached across the table and straightened the collar of my jacket. A small gesture, automatic, the kind her hands made around me without asking her permission first. It stopped us both at the same moment. We looked at each other across the booth, and she looked at her own hand still resting against my collar, and then she looked at me. "I do that a lot," she said. "You do," I said. She left her hand where it was for a moment longer. Then she folded it back, but slowly, with a smile that was private and warm and not performing anything for anyone. Dot came by with the check. She looked at the two of us with the expression of someone who has been watching the same slow, obvious story unfold across her section for years and has been waiting, with the specific patience of someone who has nowhere else to be, for the people in it to finally read the ending they were always moving toward. "About time," she said, and walked away before either of us could respond. Claire looked at me. I looked at Claire. We both laughed at the same moment. Unplanned, involuntary. The kind that has no performance in it and needs no audience. The kind that fills a corner booth in a diner on a Thursday night and spills out warm into the quiet around it. And I thought, this is what was always here. This is what we kept finding a different name for because the real name felt too large to say out loud in case we were wrong about it. Not a new thing, not a transformation, just the true shape of something that had been growing slowly in honest soil for 4 years. The way growing things do when you tend them right, not rushed, not forced, just given the right conditions and the patience to become what they were always going to become. 4 years of Thursday dinners, 4 years of saved texts and late-night calls, and 47 minutes in a booth and the particular quality of a room after she leaves it. 4 years of missing her the second she walked away and calling it something smaller than what it was. And finally, in a kitchen at 2 in the morning, on a tile floor, with cold hands and soup going lukewarm between us, saying the true thing out loud. Not because I had planned it, not because I had found the perfect moment or the perfect words, but because some truths get to a point where they simply will not go back down, and the only thing left to do is let them be heard. She heard it, and she said, "Me too." And that was enough. That was everything.